Everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the video I last updated. That was the from Saturday, the Wheeling and Lake Erie freight train heading west out of my hometown here in Bucyrus. Posted a link to the video on Facebook, and it a couple people reacted to it, and it kind of stirred up some memories of that crossing, of an incident that happened at that crossing several years ago. Actually coming up on 34 years to be exact. Anyways, I've been kind of thinking about doing a video to talk about it, but then after what happened after the comments got made and I was talking to a friend of mine about it, I decided to go ahead and do this video blog on it. So, anyone that's been watching my channel knows, I've been into trains since I was a kid. I got my Lionel train set when I was 2 years old, moving on to HO scale. Love going out, watching the real thing and everything, watching trains in real life and everything. It was about 1984, I think it was, my first year in 4-H. We had a presenter come in from Norfolk Southern to do a presentation for Operation Lifesaver. Operation Lifesaver is a highway rail grade crossing safety program here in the United States. It was launched in 1972, and basically it's aimed to prevent highway grade crossing accidents as well as trespasser accidents, and warn people of the dangers of, taking chances around railroad crossings and trains. Anyways, prior to that, I've seen like in movies and stuff where there are train sent vehicles and stuff. I never knew that was happening in real life before that. But it made me aware of, that happening, and but it was like, that's something that happens to other people. It's never going to happen to anybody I know. So anyways, flash forward to my sophomore year in high school. Is the morning of Monday, March 12th, 1990. My class, a sophomore, like I said, I was a sophomore in high school. Taking the bus to school that morning, and I was about almost, not quite, a quarter after 7 in the morning. My bus turned north onto McCracken Road. For those that are not familiar with the area, my high school, Winford High School, is about a mile west of town. And then just south of town there is a connector road. There's two east-west roads coming out of Bucyrus. One starts actually right just south of high school. It's Nevada Winford. Then a mile south of that is Bucyrus Nevada, which comes out of Bucyrus, and the two roads are basically parallel, heading west out across the county, west of town. McCracken Road, which we were turning north onto, it's a 1 mile stretch of road, 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Both ends have like a little hill that you go over, and then in the middle there's a flat stretch, and in that flat stretch, right in the middle of the road, about half mile from both ends, at the time it was Conrail. It was a railroad crossing. Originally, when I was a kid, that route coming west out of town was double track. In the early 80s, around 1983, Conrail downgraded the line and single tracked it, removing the north track. And the crossing, basically the road crosses the track at a 90-degree angle. It's a perfectly flat road. There's not even a hump as you go over the tracks or anything. It's perfectly flat and level. You can see all the way into town to the east, and there's a long straightaway looking towards the west. Coming up in the crossing, off to the west, down by the next crossing, a little ways down, which is Sin Road, there's the old Pennsylvania Railroad position light signals. The eastbound signal was an approach signal for trains going into town, and the westbound signal was a approach lit signal. Basically, if the train's in the block approaching that signal, it lights up when there's a train coming. Prior to that morning, going through that crossing, that route that I was on that morning is the same route I've been on since 6th grade, so this is like the 5th year of taking that route. And there's never any train at that crossing that time of the morning for the whole time that I can remember. But that morning, as we came up to the crossing, I saw that the signal was lit up for a westbound train to come through. So I was like, oh, cool, Conrail's got a freight train coming out of town. And I'm looking off to the east, didn't see any headlights or anything. And bus stopped at the crossing. The crossing at the time, it didn't have lights or gates. It just had the X-shaped crossbucks and the stop signs, which honestly it really didn't need lights and gates, because one thing, Conrail was downgrading the line, and then the train traffic was down, and the only time there was any highway traffic was really weekday mornings and weekday afternoons, before and after school. Other than that, the road was really not heavily used or anything. Maybe around Friday, Saturday nights around the ball games, for football and basketball, maybe, but that was about it. So anyways, we proceeded on to school. Didn't see any headlight coming out of town or anything, so I was kind of disappointed that I didn't get to see a train that morning. And I got to school, and just before classes started, a friend of mine, it's Jimmy Slagle. He came up to me and he asked me if I was the one that stopped the Amtrak passenger train outside. And I was like, okay, that's ridiculous, because we did have Amtrak coming through at the time. Amtrak actually rerouted the trains that following November. But, we had the eastbound and then Broadway Limited, and then the eastbound Capitol Limited, and then is the westbound Broadway, and then westbound Capitol Limited. All 4 trains that came through were nighttime trains. They didn't come through during the day. This is like 7:15, and it's like, why would Amtrak be stopping one of their big trains, or big name trains, out in the middle of a bunch of cornfields? So anyways, first 2 class periods, I remember hearing on the PA system, our principals would get on the PA system in different classrooms, ask us certain students in the room, and have them come down to the office. And then it was like, okay, it must be something athletic or something, or with athletics, because it's like football players, baseball players, that kind of thing. And we got to 3rd period, and I noticed that a friend of mine, he sat behind me, Dale Worthman, was not in class. His seat was empty, and I was like, okay, he must have called off sick or something. And then we went over Miss Huggins, our teacher. She passed out our homework that she had graded, went over everything, and then we went over a class lesson. And then she told us that there was a student in our school and in our classroom who wasn't going to be coming back. That was when she told us that Dale, that morning, we don't know why he stopped or didn't stop, but apparently shortly after my bus had gone through the crossing south of the high school, he had turned north on, he had come from the opposite direction from us to McCracken Road and turned north, and he for some reason did not stop at the stop signs at the crossing, and he went into the crossing at, they estimated it was about 50 miles an hour, and went into the side of the first engine of Amtrak's Capital Limited, which at the point of impact was doing about 70. He was killed instantly. And but basically that explained why he wasn't in class that morning. But we don't know exactly. We never were able to determine exactly why he didn't stop, but it's basically assumed that because around the school, one thing I was always hearing that week after the accident was, everyone was saying, oh, there was never a train at that crossing. Why was there a train at that crossing that time of the day? And, Amtrak said that the Capital Limited was due out of Crestline at 6 a.m. that morning. But for some reason it had been running late, over an hour late, and that's why it came through at that time. According to the newspaper, the engineer saw Dale's car pass the warning signs for the crossing as he started to blow the horn for the crossing, saw that Dale was not going to stop, and he threw the train into emergency and just held down on the horn, which is all he could do. Dale's car hit the side is basically the front truck, the wheel assembly on the front of the front end of the locomotive, lead locomotive, and his car got thrown off to the southwest quadrant of the crossing and to the edge of the field there. Needless to say, it was a shock. And they it was then the following fourth period session of our class. I remember I was in Mr. Smith's biology class, and that was just before the fifth period lunches were to start, and it's about 11 o'clock. Mr. Baker, our principal, got on the PA system and addressed the school to tell everyone what had happened. And he wasn't trying to beat the train because he's only doing 50 miles an hour, they said, at the time of impact. and Dale was smart enough not to have hit the train, or tried to beat a train like that. He would have known better, and it was just simply he just did not see the train for whatever reason, and it was the rest of the day for that day for me was really hazy, because I was in shock. I didn't want to believe that it had happened. Actually, my thought process that day was that when I went home, I wasn't going to talk about it with my parents, because I was like, if I don't talk about it, it never happened. So, anyways, I know that afternoon I actually almost exploded on one of my teachers. We had a teacher named Mr. Dilly who he had this thing for targeting certain students. I was one of his targets, and he would bully us, ridicule us in front of the class, that kind of thing. That afternoon, in his class I had with him, he asked me a question. I was, with everything going on, I was kind of zoned out, and I missed hearing the question. And he told me, Mr. Wagner, I know you're upset about what happened to Dale, but you're in my class, you have to pay attention now. And I know several kids around me, they kind of looked at me with their mouths kind of dropped open, like, what the fuck was he doing talking to someone like that after what happened that morning? But that afternoon, then we got on the buses to head home, and of course my bus route took us back through that crossing, and we stopped at the crossing, and Mr. Taylor, school superintendent, he was parked at the crossing to make sure everyone was stopping at the stop signs. There were still a lot of pieces of Dale's car scattered down along the tracks. I think that was the first time that I actually broke down after hearing about what happened. And I still was going to try to hide it from my parents and not talk about it, even though I had just seen pieces of a car. I mean, there's no really way to describe how the emotions of seeing what had been a vehicle that your friend had been in. And so I got home, and Mom could tell right away, as moms do, that something was wrong. So I told her, and so anyways, Dad came home from work, and he had heard about the crash at work. It's, of course, being a small town in Bucyrus, news about the accident traveled really quickly, and newspaper was delivered late that afternoon, about the time Dad got home, and the newspaper had Dale's accident on the front page. But basically, what you're looking at over on here is, this is underside of the front end of the car. Dale's car, the front end was basically twisted upside down to the back end of the car and shoved into the passenger compartment, which is what killed him. He was 16 years old. I was 15 at the time, because I hadn't turned 16 yet, but he was 15, or excuse me, 16. Had just turned 16 in December of '89, so he had only been driving for about 3 months. So the general belief has always been that he just got used to the idea of there never being a train at the crossing at that time of the day, which, you know, as I said, I even hadn't seen anything, and I basically got used to that idea, and you eventually stop expecting a train. I mean, it's easy habit to fall into. The only other thing I could think of that would have happened, I know the week before he had told me that he was really tired. I don't know if he could have possibly dozed off or blacked out as he approached the crossing. I'm not sure. But anyways, that Thursday was the funeral. It was an open casket, which was surprising, especially because I saw the person in the casket, and the person in the casket didn't look anything like Dale, and I thought it was just me. But then I heard some girl that was in line behind me tell the boy she was with, you know, it doesn't even look like him. So it was like, you know, it was just completely surreal that, you know, because you didn't want to believe it when the accident happened. Then you go to the funeral and it doesn't even look like him. It's like, you know, this can't be happening. And still remember we were at the cemetery and for the graveside service, and partway through the service there was a Norfolk Southern train that came through town with its horn blaring, which was really, I don't know, kind of like, it just, I don't know how to really describe the emotions of the time, but you know, everyone was like, you know, blaming the railroad, blaming Amtrak, saying there should be lights and gates at the crossing, and you know, the crossing itself was not what was dangerous. What was dangerous was people were so commonly running the stop signs and not looking, and unfortunately that is what happened with Dale. Whether he just became complacent about there never being a train at the crossing, or, you know, something else could happen, like I said, maybe he dozed off, maybe, I don't know. We'll never know, probably, but you know, it took me a good month after the accident to basically want anything to do with trains again. Even my model railroad layout in my parents' basement. I just did not want anything to do with trains at the time, and gradually, you know, as time went on, you know, I reminded myself, you know, it wasn't the railroad's fault, it wasn't Amtrak's fault. I mean, the engineers knew something there was going to be a crash, and he did everything he could to try to stop that train in time, but he couldn't. There's no way that the speed through there at the time for Amtrak was 79 miles an hour. Uh, he, if he was pushing, that speed limit and had slowed the train to 70, he's obviously, obviously, the only thing he could do is hit the brakes and the horn. That's all he could do. Any train crew can do in a situation like that. So, I have no grudge or anything against the train crew for what happened, or even Conrail or Amtrak. But, should there have been lights and gates at the crossing at the time? It's debatable. If people stopped at the stop sign and then yielded to the trains like the crossbucks, that's what the meaning of the crossbucks are. They're basically a yield sign for the railroad. And so, if you stopped at the stop sign and paid attention, you can see easily if there's nothing coming, proceed on. But after the accident, there were a couple days where the sheriff's office did I guess you could call it a sting operation, where they had a sheriff deputy in a cruiser at both ends of the road, and then in the middle at the crossing they had another deputy down the tracks ways, basically watching for any cars running the stop signs, and then radioing the deputy that they were heading towards, and they'd pull them over and ticket him for running the stop signs at the crossing. Well, there was one morning where 3 kids in a row got pulled over, and it was like, that's getting ridiculous. Someone just died at that crossing, and people are still running the stop signs. So, and I came up with the idea of, having an Operation Lifesaver presentation done for the school. And I brought it up to Mr. Baker, our principal. That was our junior year. I brought that up. And he basically turned down the idea, saying that it would be too traumatic for kids to watch something like that. Even though just before that, just before Christmas break, we had watched in the auditorium, our school had watched Back to the Future Part 3, which, of course, at the end, the DeLorean gets hit head-on by a freight train, gets completely obliterated. Yet they showed that, but then they don't want to do a Operation Lifesaver presentation. And then my senior year, we had a new principal. I brought it up again, and he said, well, all the presentations he'd seen of that Operation Lifesaver, they were basically aimed towards little kids, so he didn't think it was appropriate for high school. So that got shot down there. Got to college up to Heidelberg, and we had I can't remember what her title was offhand, but it's the lady in charge of health and safety programs on campus, who I talked about, and my idea of doing an Operation Lifesaver presentation. And basically, she thought it was a great idea because, Heidelberg, North Edge of Heidelberg's right along CSX's main line, and plus, timed the presentations for just before, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, and so on, spring break. Do that then for when students are going to be out traveling. It'd be a good time to remind everyone, hey, play it safe around the crossings and stuff if you're out traveling. So, some people would probably say I became obsessed with doing the presentations, and there's a reason for that, which I'm going to get into here in a second. But a lot of people, they saw the presentations. I had videos going, Operation Lifesaver videos. Some people I don't remember one lady, she is what showed, they were showing in this one video, train going into emergency braking. For basically the engine, as soon as the locomotives hit the crossing, the engineer threw it on the emergency brakes, and after about a minute or so, the train finally slowed and came to a stop. And she was just shocked that that it took a train that long to stop in emergency braking. Some people they'd see a vehicle getting hit and pushed down the tracks, and they're like, "Why isn't the train stopping?" And you tell them, the train engineer's had the train brakes on from the time of the point of impact. And so, anyways, it's a pretty big success, I would say, anyway. And the reason I became so obsessed with doing Operation Lifesaver presentations was because, and this is something over the years I've told a few people about, but I basically was blaming myself for Dale's accident. Not because I'm into trains, but because when that signal west of the crossing was lit up for the train to come through, the train was in that final block where the crossing was at. So it was literally about a minute, maybe a minute and a half away from the crossing when our bus went through there. My thought after the accident was, if I had taken just a little bit longer to get on the bus that morning, our bus would have been stopped there, because Max, our bus driver, he was very careful around that crossing every time we went through there. We would have been stopped at the crossing. Max would have seen the headlight coming. He would have waited. Dale would have been stopped behind our bus. That was my train of thought, pardon the expression, of, of basically, my thought that I could have prevented the accident. And I've talked about that with people from time to time. Even 20-some years ago when I was going through therapy, I brought it up, and everyone was always like, "Well, you never know how that could have played out and everything." And it's like, no one ever said the words that I needed to hear. I know it was about 2001 or so I first heard the term survivor's guilt. And I realized, that's why I was blaming myself for Dale's accident, was because I wanted to go back in time and, do something to prevent that from happening. Or, thinking I could have gone back or could have prevented the whole thing, and, Dale would still be alive today. But it's, every time I've gone out rail fanning, I see someone taking chances around a crossing, or kids playing on the tracks and stuff, and it's like, you have no idea how senseless that is to be doing that kind of thing, because it's so easy to wait, take a couple seconds to check, make sure the crossing's clear. It only takes a couple minutes typically to wait for a train to pass, or do you want to be sitting for eternity 6 feet under? It's, when you've been through that, you take it, you look at it very differently when you see people taking chances, around trains and stuff. And but the whole time, I basically internalized my whole thought process, though, of that I could have prevented the accident. And along that time, I mean, granted, I had tried to tell myself that, it wasn't my fault, but, every time I've talked to anyone about it, no one ever said those words to me before. And, I've been through that crossing a few times, more recently since I've been home, or moved back to Bucyrus, but, even though my senior year they did put lights and gates up at that crossing, they, I still always stop at that crossing. I can't just drive through there without stopping. And anyways, I know at the class reunions, we still remember Dale. When we had our graduation, just before the actual graduation ceremony, several members of my class took a chair up with flowers up to the front of the gymnasium for Dale. And then, because we have always considered him still part of our class and still with us. I know the last reunion we had flowers out for each member of our class that we've lost, because we've lost 2 class members since graduation from cancer. And then we had a third flower out for Dale as well, out on the tables, out on display with their pictures. So we always remember those that we've lost in our class. But anyways, yesterday I posted the video up of the crossing. When I came up to the crossing, I was actually leaving the high school, and there's an arts and crafts show out at the high school yesterday, and I had taken a bunch of my paintings that I've done, and I've had those out on display for sale. No one bought anything, but it's still a good time, and a lot of memories, obviously, being back in that high school after about 30 years. And anyways, I'm heading out to my parents' house, and of course the route takes me through that crossing there on McCracken Road. And I'm coming up to the crossing, and I saw headlights off to the east coming out of Bucyrus, and I was like, oh, hey, they don't run many trains through here. So I and of course it's now a different railroad and everything, and so I immediately pulled off at the entrance to the field off the southwest side of the crossing, and shot the video of the train. And then it was afterwards it hit me that not only I knew it was the crossing where the accident happened, but right where I was standing was where Dale's car got flung through in the accident. And basically the train in the video was approaching the crossing the same direction that the Amtrak passenger train, the Capital Limited, was coming from. And basically Dale's car would have come in from the right side in that video, of the opening of the video. So that kind of hit me afterwards. And plus I remember too that coming up on the 12th, Tuesday the 12th, it'll be 34 years since the accident. Every year since that accident happened, I swear it's like all that morning I look at the clock and I remember where I was at each stage that morning of going through that day. And then something happened last night that I have been needing for 34 years now. I posted on a couple places on Facebook that link to the video, and one of them was Crawford County group on Facebook, and someone mentioned that they had been friends with Dale Worthman, and I mentioned that, you know, I would have graduated with him. And then Steve, my realtor, a friend from high school who helped me find this house, he made the comment that he remembered Dale, and and then that's when I mentioned that I'd always felt guilty about the accident and everything, and that I could have felt that I could have prevented it. And Steve told me the 4 words that I've been waiting 34 years to hear, that no one else has ever told me, and that is, it wasn't your fault. Nobody in 34 years has ever told me, hey, it wasn't your fault. Dale's the one that, you know, he made the decision to not stop at the stop sign. He stopped looking, apparently, for the train, for any trains at the crossing. It was a freak accident. I mean, Dale was not a stupid person. That's the one thing I hate, when people just blindly say, oh, if you get hit by a train or killed by a train, then you're stupid or you're an idiot. Dale was no idiot. He was a new driver. He made a lapse in judgment. And unfortunately, when you're out on the highway, and, you know, especially like around a railroad crossing, you know, lapse in judgment or misjudgment can unfortunately lead to a fatal mistake. So, you know, just because someone gets hit by a train, just, you know, don't go blindly saying that, you know, they're an idiot or stupid or anything like that, because it does hurt those of us who have been through something, have lost someone to something like that, who, you know, it wasn't, he didn't obviously would not have intended to get hit by the train, but he just, you know, he didn't realize the danger, and unfortunately it cost him his life. And, you know, it has an effect on the rest of us too, the survivors. I mean, you think about the first responders have to deal with seeing up close the devastation and loss of life, and then there's the impact on friends and family, and, you know, it affects everyone. It affects a lot of people, not just the person at the wheel. So, but you know, finally hearing those words that it's not your fault, you know, that meant so much to me, hearing that last night. But anyway, so that's what I meant by the title of Memories Stirred Up, or Stirred Up Memories. But, you know, please play it safe when you're out on the road. You know, drive safely. Don't take chances around trains. Remember, it's, even if there's crossing signals up, it's basically up to you to determine if it's safe or not to go across. And so anyways, thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.